"Sir, we don't work on dollar store watches. And that engraving looks like it was done with a nail." Tyler barely glanced up from his phone. His tone was casual, dismissive. Arthur opened the velvet box anyway. The watch inside wasn't ticking. "You're still here?" Tyler's eyes stayed on his screen. "It belonged to my grandfather." Arthur's voice was steady. "Right. Well, like I said, we specialize in Swiss movements, high-end pieces." A woman browsing the Cartier display looked over. She nudged her husband. Tyler noticed. "Ma'am, sorry for the disruption. Some people don't understand what we do here." Arthur studied the watch. Silver case. Scratched crystal. Leather band worn smooth. "He got this in Korea," Arthur said quietly. Tyler sighed. "Sir, I'm sure it has sentimental value, but 1952. That's nice, but we really can't help with vintage pieces like that." The woman whispered something to her husband. He nodded toward Arthur. Tyler's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and almost smiled. Arthur closed the box carefully. "This is kind of awkward," Tyler said, looking around the showroom. "Maybe the jewelry repair at Macy's?" Arthur held the box against his chest. His hands weren't shaking from age. They were shaking from the effort of staying silent. But someone had been watching from the workshop doorway. Someone who recognized what Tyler couldn't see. If you believe no veteran's legacy should be dismissed, type "respect" below. Your voice matters more than you think. Arthur stood straighter. Military bearing from a war most people had forgotten. His fingers traced the box's worn edges. The velvet had faded from burgundy to rust. 60 years of careful handling. "The movement stopped 3 months ago," Arthur said. Tyler looked up briefly. "Like I said, we don't—" "I promised him I'd keep it running." A young couple with matching Apple watches paused near the Rolex display. The man pointed subtly at Arthur. "Promises are nice," Tyler said. "But this isn't really our thing." Arthur opened the box again. The Elgin A-11 caught the overhead light. On the back, barely visible, the engraving. "Time to serve, Grandpa Joe, 1952. He was a navigator," Arthur continued. "Bomber crew in Korea." Tyler's attention drifted back to his phone. A notification lit up his screen. "That's fascinating, really. But we focus on contemporary pieces." The woman from the Cartier section approached the counter. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. "Excuse me," she said to Tyler. "How much longer will this take? We have an appointment." Tyler straightened. "Of course, ma'am." "Sir," he turned to Arthur, "I think we've covered everything here." Arthur didn't move. "His plane went down behind enemy lines," Arthur said. "He carried 3 wounded men 2 miles to safety." The woman checked her Cartier watch impatiently. "Really?" "Saved 8 lives that day," Arthur continued. This was his timing watch, for navigation. Tyler's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it and suppressed a grin. "That's quite a story," the woman said. "But surely there are more appropriate places for this sort of thing." Arthur's grip tightened on the box. The arthritis in his knuckles made the motion painful. "He gave it to me when I shipped out to Vietnam," Arthur said quietly. "Told me it would bring me home." The young couple had moved closer now. The man held his phone at an angle. Tyler noticed and straightened his vintage vest. "Sir, I really think—" "It did bring me home," Arthur said. "Every day for 2 years." The woman sighed audibly. "This is becoming quite the production." Tyler glanced toward the back of the shop. Through the workshop window, a figure moved in the shadows. "Look," Tyler said, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "I understand this is important to you, but we're a high-end establishment. Our clients expect a certain atmosphere." Arthur looked down at the watch. The second hand hadn't moved in 93 days. He'd counted. "When he died," Arthur said. "I promised I'd keep his time alive." The couple exchanged glances. The man's phone was definitely recording now. Tyler caught it and smiled slightly. "Right. Well, like I said, maybe try somewhere more suitable." Arthur closed the box one more time. The sound was barely audible. But in the workshop, someone heard it clearly. Someone whose father had told him stories about American pilots. about navigation watches, about promises that lasted longer than wars. "Stephanie," Tyler called toward the back office. "Can you help me here?" A woman in her 30s emerged, tablet in hand. Her expression was professionally polite but firm. "Is there a problem?" she asked. "Not exactly a problem," Tyler said. "Just a misunderstanding about our services." Stephanie looked at Arthur, then at the box in his hands. "Sir, I think Tyler explained that we work exclusively with luxury timepieces. Swiss movements, contemporary collections." Arthur opened the box again. "This is a 1952 Elgin A-11. "I'm sure it is," Stephanie said smoothly. "But vintage pieces require specialized equipment we simply don't have." The woman with the Cartier appointment tapped her watch. "We really do need to get started." "Of course," Stephanie said. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside so we can assist our scheduled clients." Arthur didn't move. "My grandfather's name was Joseph Collins," he said. "Master Sergeant, 8th Bomber Command." Tyler's phone buzzed again. This time he answered it. "Hey, you're not going to believe this," he said into the phone, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've got this old guy here with some beat-up watch making up war stories." The recording couple leaned in closer. Stephanie touched Arthur's elbow gently. "Sir, please. You're creating a disturbance." "He kept this watch in his breast pocket," Arthur continued, "right over his heart. When the shrapnel hit, it stopped the piece that would have killed him." "That's quite dramatic," Stephanie said. "But this really isn't the place for—" "He lived 3 more days," Arthur said, "long enough to get his men to safety." Tyler ended his call and looked around the showroom. "Sorry about this, everyone. Some people just don't understand boundaries." A new customer entered, a man in an expensive suit who immediately gravitated toward the Patek Philippe display. Stephanie noticed. "Sir, I'm going to have to insist—" "The watch stopped when his heart did," Arthur said quietly. 2:47 p.m., October 15th, 1952. Tyler laughed. "Right, and let me guess, it's been running on magic ever since?" The suited man looked over with mild interest. "It ran for 70 years, Arthur said, "until 3 months ago." "Convenient," Tyler said. "Look, this is getting weird. Maybe it's time to—" Arthur's hands began to shake. Not from arthritis this time. From the effort of not responding to the smirk on Tyler's face. From watching strangers treat his grandfather's sacrifice like entertainment. From standing in a room full of people who thought their money made them better than his family's service. "Please," Stephanie said firmly. "You need to leave." Arthur looked down at the watch one final time. The second hand pointed straight up, where it had stopped when Master Sergeant Joseph Collins took his last breath in a field hospital in Seoul, where Arthur had promised it would start again. He wrapped the watch carefully in its cloth and placed it back in the box. Behind him, Tyler was already describing the encounter to someone on his phone. "Yeah, totally made up. These guys always have the same story." Arthur turned toward the door, but he didn't make it that far, because Hiroshi Tanaka had finally seen enough. Arthur stopped 3 feet from the exit. His fingers found the box's brass clasp, opened it one last time. No one was watching now. Tyler was back on his phone. Stephanie was greeting the suited customer. The recording couple had moved to the Tag Heuer section. Arthur lifted the watch gently, turned it over in his palm. The engraving caught the afternoon light filtering through the storefront. "Time to serve. Grandpa Joe, 1952. But there was more. On the inner case, words so faint they were barely visible. "For my grandson, keep our time alive, semper fi." Arthur closed his eyes. For just 3 seconds. In that moment, he wasn't 79 years old in a watch shop in 2024. He was 19, standing on a dock in San Francisco, watching his grandfather pin the watch to his uniform. "This brought me home from Korea, son. It'll bring you home from Vietnam." It had. Through 2 years of jungle patrol and mortar fire, and nights when he thought the darkness would swallow everything good in the world. The watch had ticked against his chest, steady as a heartbeat, reliable as love. Arthur opened his eyes. His thumb brushed the crystal face. "I kept your time alive for 50 years, Grandpa," he whispered. "I tried." A single tear hit the watch face. Arthur wiped it away carefully, then wrapped the watch in its cloth, placed it in the box, and closed the lid. Behind the workshop window, Hiroshi Tanaka had been watching every movement. He'd seen the way Arthur held the watch, like a prayer, like a promise, like something sacred being surrendered. Hiroshi had been making watches for 35 years. He knew the difference between sentiment and reverence. He knew the weight of a man's last connection to someone he'd lost. And he knew, from the careful way Arthur handled that particular watch, exactly what he was looking at. An Elgin A-11 navigation watch, used by bomber crews in Korea and World War II. Hiroshi's father had told him about those watches, about the American airmen who'd worn them, about the missions that had saved his village from starvation in 1945, about the promises that crossed oceans and generations. Hiroshi stepped out of the workshop, quietly, respectfully, the way his father had taught him to approach sacred things. "Excuse me." The voice was quiet but carried weight. Arthur turned. An older Japanese man stood beside him. Silver hair, careful posture, hands that moved like they understood precision. "May I see your watch?" Hiroshi asked. Tyler looked up from his phone. "Hiroshi, don't encourage him. I already explained." "Please," Hiroshi said to Arthur, ignoring Tyler completely. "May I?" Arthur hesitated, then opened the box. Hiroshi's breath caught. "This is an Elgin A-11. You know it?" Arthur's voice was barely audible. "Know it?" Hiroshi stepped closer. "My father used to tell me stories about these watches." Tyler frowned. "It's just some old—" "Tyler." Hiroshi's voice cut through the showroom like a blade. "Be quiet." The entire shop went silent. Stephanie looked up from her customer. The recording couple stopped mid-conversation. Even the woman with the Cartier appointment paused. Hiroshi gently lifted the watch from its box. A-11, navigation watch, standard issue for bomber crews, 1940 to 1955. He turned it over, squinting at the engraving. "Time to serve." "Your grandfather was military?" "Korea," Arthur said. "Navigator, 8th Bomber Command." Hiroshi's hands trembled slightly. "What was his name?" "Joseph Collins, Master Sergeant." Hiroshi looked up sharply. "Collins?" Arthur nodded. "My father—" Hiroshi's voice broke slightly. "My father was Kenji Tanaka. Seoul, 1952. His unit was cut off behind enemy lines for 6 days." Arthur's eyes widened. "American bombers dropped supplies," Hiroshi continued. "Food, medicine. My father always said the navigation was perfect. The pilots found them when everyone else had given up." The showroom was absolutely quiet now. "He kept a piece of the supply crate," Hiroshi said, "with the pilot's name stenciled on it." Arthur's breath stopped. "Master Sergeant J. Collins, Navigator." The box slipped from Arthur's hands. Hiroshi caught it. "Your grandfather," Hiroshi said, tears in his eyes, "saved my father's life." Tyler's phone fell to the counter. Stephanie released her customer's arm. The recording couple lowered their phones. "This watch," Hiroshi continued, holding it like it was made of light, "guided the plane that dropped food to 43 starving soldiers in the mountains of Korea." He looked directly at Tyler. "This is not a dollar store watch. This is not vintage junk. This is history." Hiroshi's voice grew stronger. "This watch is worth more than every piece in this showroom combined. Not in money, in meaning." He turned back to Arthur. "And you," he said quietly, "are the grandson of the man who brought my father home from war." Arthur couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only stand there as the weight of 70 years settled around him like grace. "I can fix this," Hiroshi said. "Not just the movement. I can make it perfect again." He looked around the showroom one more time. At Tyler, whose face had gone pale, at Stephanie, who was staring at the watch like she'd never seen one before, at the customers who had forgotten why they'd come. "And I can make sure," Hiroshi said, "that it never stops again." 1 week later, Arthur returned to Precision Timepieces. The showroom looked different. A new display case sat near the front window. Inside, 3 military watches gleamed under soft lighting. A Hamilton from World War II, a Benris from Vietnam, and in the center position, an Elgin A-11 from Korea. A small plaque read, "Military Heritage Collection, in honor of those who served." The ticking was the first thing Arthur heard. Steady, strong, perfect. Hiroshi emerged from the workshop carrying a small wooden box. "It's ready," he said simply. Arthur opened the box with shaking hands. The Elgin A-11 looked exactly as it had 70 years ago. The crystal was clear. The case gleamed. The leather band was new but aged to match the original. And it was running. The second hand swept around the face with mechanical precision. The minute hand moved in perfect increments. The hour hand pointed exactly where it should. 2:47, Arthur whispered. "I set it to the exact time it stopped," Hiroshi said. "When your grandfather died. Now it counts forward. Every second he didn't get to live, it lives for him." Arthur lifted the watch to his ear. The ticking was like a heartbeat, like a promise kept, like time itself had been forgiven. Tyler approached slowly. His vintage vest was gone, replaced by a simple button-down shirt. "Sir," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology." Arthur looked at him. "I've been reading about the Korean War," Tyler continued, "about the bomber crews, about what they did." He gestured toward the display case. "We're starting a military heritage program. Free cleaning and basic maintenance for any veteran's timepiece. No questions asked." Arthur nodded but didn't speak. Stephanie joined them. "We've also partnered with the local VA," she said. "Veterans can bring their watches here for evaluation. If they're significant pieces, we'll restore them for free." She paused. "We want to make sure we never dismiss something important again." Arthur strapped the watch to his wrist. The weight felt exactly right. The ticking aligned perfectly with his pulse. "There's something else," Hiroshi said. He led Arthur to the workshop window. On the workbench sat a photograph. A young Japanese soldier standing next to a supply crate. On the side of the crate, stenciled in black paint, MSGTJ, Collins, Navigator. "My father kept this for 70 years, Hiroshi said. "I think your grandfather would want you to have it." Arthur stared at the photograph, at the young man who would become Hiroshi's father, at the crate that had carried hope across an ocean and a war, at the proof that some promises echo through generations. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He simply stood there, listening to his grandfather's watch tick against his wrist, keeping perfect time, the way it always had, the way it always would. Outside, the afternoon sun caught the window display. The 3 military watches gleamed like medals, and for the first time in 3 months, Arthur Collins smiled. Not because his watch was fixed, but because his grandfather's time was alive again, and always would be. Some timepieces don't just tell time, they tell stories. If this story touched you as much as it touched me while researching it, consider supporting this work. Each story takes hours to be treated with the respect these heroes deserve. Buy Me a Coffee link is pinned in the first comment, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now. We have more stories that need to be told.